One moment, please.
1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, NBC. Hello, NBC. This is KVIE in Honolulu, Hawaii. We have witnessed this morning a severe bombing of Pearl Harbor by enemy planes, undoubtedly Japanese.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
When President Franklin Roosevelt addressed the nation, there was no television. His words came over the radio. During World War II, the government went on to employ a little-known group of Japanese Americans to make radio broadcasts to Japan, and those broadcasts played a strategic role in the Allied war effort.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, 2/3 of them American citizens, 1/3 alien.
The government allowed a grace period, during which time Japanese Americans could voluntarily relocate away from military-sensitive areas. Such areas were often on the coasts and were classified as Zone A. Sam Masami Ono and his family were Japanese Americans living in San Francisco. At this time, his two children were Stanley, born in 1939, and Gary, born in 1940. Sam Ono was a salesman of Japanese products in a San Francisco import-export company. It was in Zone A, so needless to say, his job ended abruptly. His own and extended family moved inland. Mrs. Sam Ono remembered the family moved to her father's farm in Cortez, California, which was in Zone B. The family believed this would keep them from being uprooted from California.
Our government was faced with the necessity of building up its own information bureaucracy. It eventually became the Office of War Information.
The WWII would be in charge of all propaganda against Japan, against Germany, against the enemy nations. There were also propaganda plans for the neutrals.
There was a call for people who might want to test the CBS monitoring program, which was located behind the Palace Hotel, and they asked us how much Japanese we knew, and I said, really, it's what I've learned through my grandmother and my mother and UC Berkeley, where I learned the translation.
A buddy of mine heard about a job opening with the government down at the Palace Hotel, and I had gone with him for moral support. And the interviewer said, "Why don't you try?" So I did. And I put on the earphones, monitored some Japanese broadcasts from Japan, and piped what I heard in English as I sat listening. I got the job.
I did the translation exam. So accidentally I got into the civil service. That's how I got into coordinator of information at the time they call it. And later it turned out to be Officer of War Information.
Up and down the West Coast, racism and reprisal mounted, culminating in the evacuation of all Japanese, including those in Zone B. The Sam Ono family was put into an assembly center, along with thousands of others. They were held there, while more permanent concentration camps were being built. Months later, all were taken by train to a War Relocation Authority concentration camp. It was located near Grenada, Colorado, and was named Amachi.
While San Francisco continued to serve as headquarters from which many of these radio broadcasts were transmitted, the people reading the news and providing translations couldn't continue to reside on the West Coast if they were of Japanese ancestry.
He started working in Denver at the KVIE Mutual. Shozo Baba, Bob Yamasaki, and I were the only ones.
From Denver, the Japanese language programs were transmitted over a land phone line to San Francisco. There, the programs were recorded on vinyl-coated glass records and then broadcast to Japan.
To reach their target area more comprehensively, they had to have big, new, more powerful transmitters. And the government procured land up at Delano, which is up the coast, California coast, Delano and Dixon, which is inland.
A front-page article of the Amachi newspaper solicited internees proficient in Japanese. An internee named George Dote recalled his and Sam Ono's recruitment.
That guy come pick me up over there with your father. So he passed a test and then get into the Denver.
Another recruit was Gish Endo from the Heart Mountain concentration camp. He dug canals by day and taught bookkeeping by night.
A recruiter came to camp and interviewed, and I think it was about a month later that I received a letter saying that I was hired and for me to go to Denver and to start working there.
Most of the recruits shared similar backgrounds. They were Kibe, Americans partly educated in Japan. They included Sam Masami Ono, who was born in Santa Rosa, California. When Sam was 9 years old, he was sent off to Okayama-ken, Japan, to study. He returned in 1928, able to speak and write Japanese. He did well in the American schools and excelled in track. In 1938, he married young Kim Okamura.
The Kibe, when they returned to the United States, they were of tremendous value to the war effort because they were thoroughly up to date on the Japanese language and culture of the day.
When I discovered the British political warfare mission letter hiring George Dote and my father, I realized why we were released, why we moved into living quarters above a movie theater in Denver. Curious to find out more, I traveled to Denver, Washington, D.C., Japan, and England to investigate further. At the Public Records Office in London, I uncovered an original script in Japanese in my father's handwriting of a British radio program and other documents of his wartime job. In 1997, I organized The Other Side of Tokyo Rose, a panel program made up of the veteran radio broadcasters, so that they could share their unheralded story. One of my first questions was why my father and they never talked about what they did in Denver.
Mr. Sparks says, at any time, do not mention what you were involved in during the Denver stay and the San Francisco stay. So I took it for granted that he meant it to be secret.
In fact, my wife doesn't even know what I did during the war.
Overseeing these broadcasts was the Office of War Information, or OWI, the British Political Warfare Mission, or BPWM, for which Sam Ono worked, was the other arm of this Anglo-American effort.
The group consisted, as far as I know, of Gish Endo, Frank Hattori, George Dote, and your father, Sam Ono.
The American Office of War Information and the British Political Warfare Mission shared the same studio in Denver. Most program content was the same. except the British Political Warfare Mission announced the names of the Japanese POWs, and the Office of War Information did not.
One of the reasons given was that it wasn't conducive to the Japanese audience because being a prisoner was a disgrace.
A branch of the OWI, the Foreign Morale Analysis Division, surveying these prisoners of war, and nearly 90% of these Japanese prisoners said they had no desire to return to Japan after the war because they believed themselves to have dishonored their families.
Source materials for American and British psychological warfare against Japan came from major newspapers, such as the New York Times, plus AP and UPI wire services. Those source materials were then woven into Denver broadcast scripts.
Our government immediately hired well-known writers, I mean actual novelists, and to write scripts, radio scripts.
してこの金曜疑問に対する返答は要するに指導それにあります。日本社会は少なくとも昭和時代以前において時世の
Well, I was sort of a jack of all trades since we were short of staff. I did some writing, I did some producing, directing announcers, and voicing programs.
ようにこれはアメリカの声であります。
Our workday usually started at 6 o'clock in the evening. That is because all the day's news had to come in by teletype. And my boss would tear the teletype off the machine and cut it up into segments of 4. And he would give each one of us a section to translate. And we had approximately 2 hours to finish the translation and condense it and put it into forms suitable for broadcast.
It's just the pressure of time, getting everything right the first time, getting it in time, and broadcasting within the limits that you're supposed to do it. That's pressure.
We would be monitored by Caucasians who understood Japanese, or supposedly understood Japanese. As I recall, there were 2 who used to be missionaries in Japan.
We had a big argument with a certain pronunciation of the words. They only know missionary term pronunciation.
Both Allied and Axis powers employed extensive radio propaganda. Japan's English broadcasting included programs such as 0 Hour.
Hello, you fighting orphans of the Pacific. How strict? This is After Her Weekend Annie, back on the air strictly under UN hours.
Some of Japan's psychological warfare broadcasts targeted specific groups, such as Black American soldiers. Another program series that gained the most notoriety featured seductive female announcers who were collectively nicknamed Tokyo Rose.
It must have been close to 8 or 10 people, young men, women who broadcast, including Caucasian women. The person who was identified as Tokyo Rose, Iva Toguri. Her name was often Anne, because she felt that she was really orphaned out there. She couldn't get back to the States, in spite of the fact her father tried everything to get her on the ship coming back to the United States.
As many as 10,000 Nisei were trapped in Japan. Kei Kitsuda was one of them. He was attending school in Japan when the war broke out.
During the war, I had a friend, Makoto Yamada, and he found how to make a shortwave radio book at antique bookstore, and he bought it and showed me. So we both of us started to making a shortwave radio station. In spite of it was forbidden to listen or to make the shortwave radio. My parents are watching, and I have to hide in the closet, and I don't want them to find out that I'm listening to shortwave radio. I enjoyed that music part because music was very relaxing, you know.
The news was a small part of a 3-hour broadcast. Much of those 3 hours, the majority of those 3 hours would be music and entertainment with some news interspersed. By 1943, you would have sort of straight news, selected news, and the news would be interspersed with commentaries designed to achieve some of these propaganda objectives as they evolved and as the military effort began to succeed.
A friend of mine at the school was telling me that during the war, the Japanese military was listening because he said his brother is working for the army and they're listening, especially to this broadcast and, you know, evaluate.
The WWII has estimated during the war that there were perhaps 1,500 shortwave radios, only 500 or so they believed to be officially sanctioned.
Insulated by the nature of their work and the odd hours they kept, the Japanese-American broadcasters developed friendships among themselves.
I was the only one with a car, so I became rather popular. Most of us were in our early 20s, and even with the war going on, life was pretty pleasant.
Well, first you went Denver, here and there. In a restaurant, they say, no Japaro here or something, you know.
I was in the Albany Hotel elevator, inside by myself, and the door opened, and a Caucasian woman and 2 gentlemen were about to enter. And all of a sudden, this woman said, I'm not going to go in with that woman in there.
Father's home was bombed, so then they had to go to the country and live. So I had no communication with them during the war. I had mixed feelings, but then my loyalty was to the United States.
When I first came back from Japan, I ran for student body office, all that. Wanted to become an American. So when I went to work for the government, I thought, here, this is where I'm going to make my contribution. I'm a full-fledged, prove that I'm a full-fledged American.
In 1943, they began to talk about the militarists, the military leadership of Japan. These primarily army officers. These militarists, the propagandists said, were leading Japan down a path of destruction contrary to the wishes of the emperor.
By July of 1944, the Allies captured the Pacific island of Saipan and soon set up a radio relay station. This 1,500-mile distance to Japan allowed retransmitting the shortwave programs from the United States over the more accessible AM radio band.
We were doing skits of what Japan must have been like under all that bombing, and telling them that get rid of Tojo, he's the one that's brought this on, don't you hear the bombs coming? And we would do little skits of screaming and yelling, showing our fright because of all the bombs.
By this time, clearly the war is not going well for the Japanese. The emphasis went from not only arguing that Allied victory was certain, but that Japanese destruction was inevitable.
We used to announce the bombing, the forecast of bombing, And we name about 5 cities, or that 2 will be bombed next day.
The reason primarily was to encourage the Japanese workforce to leave the cities, and therefore they would no longer be able to produce any kind of war material.
When it came to the ultimate bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there were no warnings as far as I know. At least our office did not handle it. And I doubt whether the military did.
In February 1945, before the end of the war, the Denver operation shut down.
First of all, they had to find housing for us in the Bay Area. After that, we were just told to go, period. They gave us the train fare, tickets.
The overwhelming majority of Japanese Americans had to start life all over again. They faced the full range of failures and successes of resettlement. Sam Ono helped his father-in-law restart his Japanese confectionery shop. He also tried reoperating his import-export business. And when that didn't pan out, he worked in a produce market for over 20 years. He died in 1981. He was never to know what Congress and the President of the United States finally did for his family and so many Japanese Americans 7 years later.
My fellow Americans, we gather here today to right a grave wrong. More than 40 years ago, shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry living in the United States were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in makeshift internment camps. The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors.
To end the wars, even one day sooner, that's our purpose, even one day sooner. So we got to save hundreds of thousands of people, not only human life, but the cost and everything. War is the most unproductive venture in human effort.
For information on obtaining a DVD of Calling Tokyo, please visit intraverse1.com.